Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Welcome to Witchy Work Wishes. I'm your host, Charlene, and today we are working on our potions and spells, specifically in the area of eggshell magic. But first, I'd like to share some things I did over the weekend to help with my own personal practice. Now, do you ever do so much physical work that just know you're going to pay a price, like a big price? Yeah, I had it this weekend. I did the final hurrah of decorating, building furniture, like furniture, the one that has the 12-page, 24-step, every piece is separate type building. I moved things around and took things to storage. And on Saturday, I knew it was coming. Like so much so that towards the end of getting it all done, I actually started drawing a bath before I even finished, knowing I needed to immediately get my sore muscles in hot water. Even then, I still took Advil once I got out so it could start, kicking in. I got myself in jammies and curled up with a movie. But I did get it all done, at least situated. I still need to do a final clean, but that's the least of my worries and jobs to do. So I actually got my surgery date last week, and it's happening on November 14th. At first, typical me, I was like, I want this during a waning moon, not a new moon like the 14th will be. But then I let it settle, and on my drive back to the office, though, I actually thought, this is perfect. I'm starting a new chapter in my life, and what a great opportunity to have it launched on a new moon. So between now and then, there is a bunch of pre-surgery things I'll be doing to get my body ready for this fresh new start. And of course, I have already complained about one, which was my caffeine addiction, and going through those painful withdrawals of coffee, but that one is done. Now, I have not had caffeine since the 1st of October, so I'm happy. I'm just keep checking those boxes off of everything I need to do. And ultimately, I'm pretty resolved and happy with the 14th, and I'm ready. Emotionally, I have been gearing up for this for over a year now. More specifically, though, actively gearing up for it and planning it since I looked at the mid-year, halfway point of my goals and reassessed everything. Now, if you have not listened to that episode yet, you still have time. There are 2 months left in our calendar year before we start with a new batch of 2024 goals. So go back and listen if you think you need a refresher on your January goals. It's episode number 36. But that's what helped me kind of get my butt into gear and get things moving. This was a big thing on my 2023 goals, and when I looked at them in July, I realized I really had not done the work needed on it yet. So here we are. I'm going to be able to wrap it up before the end of the year. So I did a card pull just for some general guidance. Do you guys ever do this? I was tired this past weekend, like physically tired. And come Sunday evening, I needed a little pick-me-up. Now, I did not have anything specific to ask, nor any weighing problems. I just needed something. So I went to my animal oracle deck and drew the porcupine spirit, which says, "Time for a beginner mind. When porcupine spirit calls your name, you are being asked to adopt a beginner's mind and to approach situations with innocence and curiosity. The old, confining stories no longer have a hold on you. Life is full of surprises hiding in plain sight. Looking up at the world afresh with new eyes can help you find what you've been seeking, whether it's a relationship, an opportunity, or evidence that you have all you need right now to co-create what you desire." Who knew? Porcupine asks you to be playful and have a childlike curiosity. There is so much waiting for you that you have yet to discover. I liked it. I read it. I took a deep breath in, sat with the words for a bit, and just enjoyed the guidance. It's nice direction for the coming week. And the coming week, the moon, it's happening. Our Samhain full moon. While it might not be full on the 31st or the 1st, it will be in the days preceding. And we have a bunch of energy, specifically, I think, in connection to a very thin veil happening this weekend. So protect yourself before you do any work and be open to other realms reaching out. who knows what can happen in the next couple of days. Well, speaking of protecting ourselves, let's get into some spell and potions, specifically eggshell magic. Spells and potions. They really are a staple in our practice. And for the next 12 months, I'm going to be highlighting something each month with them. Now, today, we are working on how we can use eggshells in our potions and spells. Now, before I begin today's topic, though, I really would like to put, not a disclaimer, but, with anything we do in our practice, safety should always come first, right? Be deliberate, have intentions, and do your research well beyond the general outlines that I give in the podcast. All right, with that, let's jump into protection work real quick, especially with Samhain next week. There is probably a lot on everyone's list. It is so very important with everything we do, right? And honestly, I could probably clear the slate with drafted topics for the rest of this year and just talk about protection work. It really is that important. The why? Everything. It sure seems like that everything needs a little protection. And why do we do it? We protect ourselves, it's to keep our space clear, to keep our spiritual energy safe. Protection allows us to block bad energy, that unwanted negative energy some people have and some things have. Protection is about keeping us safe while we work on any area of our craft, whether you call it shielding, protection circle, protection charm, so on and so on and so on. It's all about the same thing, keeping us safe. All right, with that said, eggshells are a wonderful resource in our protection spells and potions. So eggs, in general, are incredible. Now, I grew up with backyard chickens and had the amazing opportunity to have fresh, organic eggs every weekend with my mom's Sunday brunch, as well as have them in her amazing kitchen baking and meals growing up. Now, I distinctly remember the first time I ate a store-bought egg. It was so very different and not at all what I was used to. Now, you may think, why? What's the difference? Oh my gosh, I promise it's huge. If you've grown up eating eggs a certain way and then you switch over, probably vice versa, if you grow up eating store-bought and then switch over to fresh, it's going to be a drastic change. Now, of course, not everyone has access to their own set of backyard chickens, but there are other ways to get fresh eggs and be able to use their amazing eggshells. Our local farmers market can be one option. Friends, of course, neighbors maybe. But if you truly can't get fresh eggs, I would say the next best option is the organic options at your local grocery store. Okay, the egg. Why is it so powerful? Well, the short version is that there are two main ways life starts. Either internally, right, where both the fertilization and the growth of the embryo are internal, or externally, where the fertilization takes place internally, but the growth of the embryo is outside of the reproductive system. The technical terms for this are viviparous, which is both fertilization and growth happening inside the body. This is going to be for most all of our mammals. And oviparous. There is internal fertilization, but the growth is external. This is going to be for birds and reptiles. Now, there is actually one more category. If I say it right, it's called ovoviviparous, which is for some sharks and snakes, where an egg is actually formed, but it does stay inside the body, actually hatches inside the body, and grows inside the body, and then is born later. Now, humans, we are viviparous, right? The female body does all of the work internally. But today, it's all about the egg. The amazing little egg is so powerful that its cover is a protective shell, and inside, it feeds and nourishes a little life. It's no wonder eggshells are used so widely in protective and health spells and potions. The egg, it symbolizes life, fertility, it symbolizes birth and resurrection, it represents spring and new beginnings, it represents health. An egg symbolizes protection and transformation. So how do we do it? What are some options with eggs and eggshells? Well, the first one I pulled is eggshell powder. Now, this is known as cascarilla. Cascarilla is actually a West Indies shrub, and the ground bark powder was used as medicine. Now, you may have heard of ifan, which is a West African term. It's basically the practice of taking white chalk-like substance, which is the powdered cascarilla, and using it to draw images on a shaved head and shaved body for protection against evil spirits. The Santeria practice does this. It's used in hoodoo, voodoo, Haitian magic, and other South American magic. Now, since the cascarilla plant was not readily available to everyone, as the practices grew, eggshells were used in place of the plant. And not just any eggshell, but the eggs specifically born from black hens. Now, they were dried, the shells, not the hens. The shells were dried and ground into a powder and used just like the cascarilla paste, to draw images. So if you heard the term cascarilla, it could be either the actual plant powder or eggshell powder. All right, how do we make it? Well, of course, save your eggshells after breaking open the eggs. You wash them, thoroughly wash them, and then you can let them dry in the counter. If you do that, it's got to be quite a while. Or you can throw them into an oven and bake them or leave them out in the sun. But you definitely want the shells completely dry. Grab your pestle and mortar and grind them down into a fine powder. Now, if you're not immediately using the powder, you can store it for later use. Eggshell and cascarilla powder is very useful in warding off negative energy. Now, to be consistent with the original uses of the powder, it can be used on our bodies. It can be used as an extra ingredient in things like, added to our candle magic, to our baths and things around our homes, to help cleanse and protect. Really, in that powder form, we can add it to a bunch of our workings. Now, I don't use the powder in a protective circle. I personally like the eggshell chunks, not the powder form for that, but I have that a little bit later. For the finely ground powder form of, eggshell potions and spells, I think we can sprinkle it. We can dust it everywhere we want to ward off negative energy. Now, there is another step that we can take with the powder and actually make a chalk out of it. Going back to the West African practices, using the cascarilla powder and adding some hot water and flour will create a chalk-like mixture. Of course, you mix everything up. It's going to look almost like bread dough-like or clay even. You hand roll the mixture into the shape of little pieces of chalk or big pieces. Let them dry for a week, and then you have the cascarilla chalk. Now, this can be used to draw whatever protective form you wish to work with. Sigils, of course, are great here. Side note, I did find some research saying cascarilla powder can be mixed into an ingestible form. Now, I do not have any experience with this and cannot speak adequately on it. So if that is something that interests you, please do your research. It is said that the potion can work by, creating a boundary, just like the eggshells do, but a boundary between us and other worlds. So it can also be used as a cleansing source. All right, second, I pulled kitchen magic and eggs. Which or no which, eggs are going to be in just about everyone's fridge, right? If you enjoy cooking and baking, you're going to need them at some point. For the kitchen witches, it's about adding our intentions as we crack the eggs open. And don't just think about, eggs in our food. Think about eggs in everyone's food. I give my big German Shepherd a raw egg mixed into his food each morning. And when I crack it open, I am definitely giving the intentions of love and health. With each stir, I circle around the bowl. Remember, clockwise to add something, counterclockwise to remove something. And again, I wash the eggshell when done and let it dry for use later. Number 3, I've got garden magic and eggshells. I really toyed with what my picture for this week's podcast was going to be. I post something every time there's a new episode. And the first one I created was with eggshells and little seeds growing out of them, because that is just something I love using eggshell magic. But I ended up going a different route. And I just showed all of my crushed eggshells and some that are drying. But I personally do love eggshells to start seeds. It's a double use, right? Eggshells in our gardens go back to some old, tried and true traditions. Eggshells help us fight things off like snails and slugs that can damage our garden. They release a bunch of calcium to the dirt when mixed in with the soil. They release sodium to the plants when mixed in with the soil. And how about a little superstition for our garden? It is said that if you bury an egg in the early days of spring, you'll have healthy crops for harvest. You'll also be gifting the nature spirits in your garden and keeping them happy so they help you all spring and summer long. Now, with our little seedlings or our seeds, think calcium here. It is something our gardens and our plants need. And guess what? The egg shells have it. Think protection here. The eggshells are perfect. And of course, think new beginnings. Seeds are all about it. And during the colder months of late winter and early spring, it's a great time to think about starting our seeds that we'll be using in spring. Now, for me, once my seeds have sprouted, I like to crack the bottom of the shells pretty well before planting them in a pot, only to give the roots a good chance of growing down into the soil and to help the shells start to decompose and give their nutrients to the soil around the seeds. So I'll break the bottom of the shell, like crush it a little bit, and then plant it all together in the pot. Eggshells in our gardens are great just crushed too. Sprinkling them around our gardens, of course, mixed into birdseed. Yes, birds need the calcium too, for that matter. We can add it to our dog food for a boost as well. But mixed into our garden mulch and used with fairy offerings. All right, number 4, I've got egg health magic. Have you heard of an egg cleanse before? And this is not an internal cleanse, but it's an external cleanse. Well, it actually goes back, like way back to both Mexican and American magic spells. And it's where you take a raw egg and you rub it all over your body, like all over your body. And it absorbs any negative energy or illness you may have on or in you. Now, there are 2 ways to then interpret the results. For both, you crack open the egg and place it in a bowl or plate. One ritual says that if there is blood or a blood spot on the yolk, then you have something evil working in you. The other one says to read the color of the yolk and the pattern it shows to tell you what you may be suffering from or, what illness you may have. For more, modern times, we have other things we can look for. Blood in general is not going to be good either way, though. Any amount of it or spot of it can mean that you have been cursed. If the yolk is broken, it can mean that extra time is needed on our subconscious and our internal self, and our problems are stemming from something out of balance within them. If you see a really large white clot, there is some form of negative blockage in our life. And not, the little white spots or clots. I think those are pretty typical and normal. You'll want to take note if it's a really, really big one. Now, there's another way to interpret results. After you rub the egg all over your body, you can put it in water instead of on a plate or a bowl to read it. Again, look for a blood spot, any type of blood. That's never going to be good. It does usually mean there's an illness. If the water around the egg gets murky or is cloudy, you are not fully cleansed. And if the water is clear and little bubbles float up around it, you are all set and clean. Basically, with water reading, you're looking at the yolk and seeing how the white of the egg reacts in the water. A double yolk can mean a major life change coming. Let's see, the whites will rise up. They can sometimes look like a spider web. The whites may take the shape of a skull or a face. Maybe you'll see some spikes forming. Now, all of it means something. So if you're interested in doing a full egg cleanse with water or just with a plate, or a bowl, read up on it. It's really interesting. There's a bunch of information out there. All right, number 5, onto our potions and spells. Now, we know the amazing magical properties of eggs and eggshells, right? The egg symbolizes life, fertility, birth, and resurrection, spring and new beginnings. It represents health, protection, and transformation. So that is where we want to head for our potions and our spells. Step 1, we wash and dry our eggshells. Now, there is a bunch of direction for taking, the membrane out before you dry the shells, but I don't. That protective membrane, that nourishing membrane, is exactly what I want in my workings. So I dry the eggshells out in their natural state over a longer period of time before crushing. So the membrane actually dries out too. But again, if this is not something you're comfortable with, I would say do you with this one. If you do think you're going to use the eggshells for internal use or with any type of health medicine, type potions, drying them out in the oven would probably be best, since that will help sterilize the shells and remove any bacteria. Just use a nice low heat for that one. But, quick side note here, if you are soaking your eggshells in boiling water to clean them first, save the water, and once it's cooled, water your plants with it. They will thank you. Even if you're making like hard-boiled eggs, save the water and share it with your plants once it's cooled. All right, step number 2, ground them into the powder consistency that you want to work with. Again, personally, I don't get mine into a fine powder. I kind of like the sharp edges and find their protective element to be even more powerful in my spells. But you'll know what consistency you need and like working with when you start doing it. Again, for the health potions, you'll probably want something more than the mortar and pestle to grind the shells, since you really do need a fine powder for most of them. But for the day in and day out spells, the mortar and pestle should work just fine. All right, making our spells and potions. Now, as with any potion spell, our intent is what we make it to be. Our thoughts, our words, and our direction of the elements is what creates the magic, along with the carefully picked tools and ingredients. So things we can do with eggshells. First and foremost, spread them at the edge of your property for a protection barrier. You can also sprinkle crushed shells on our windowsills for home protection. We can add a tablespoon of fine eggshell powder to our floor wash to cleanse it. We can blend eggshells into a powder and use it for drawing a protection sigil. Now, when casting a circle, use ground eggshells to draw the circle, especially if you are casting a circle outside. I know salt is a big component of casted circles, but eggshells are a better, natural, healthier alternative for our ground, soil, and dirt where salt is not. Now, personally, this is probably where I use my eggshells the most. Now, dusting is also another thing we can do with eggshells. Dusting a protective shield maybe around ourselves, just like fairy dust. We can sprinkle a tiny pinch of finely ground eggshell dust on ourselves to create a shield of protection around our body. We can certainly add crushed eggshells to our witch's black salt. We can add a tablespoon of finely ground eggshell powder to our ritualistic purification baths. We absolutely can add crushed eggshells to our plant soil. Absolutely should. For increasing our psychic abilities, eggshells can be used in divination and to contact spirits. And also hexes. Just as much as we can use the eggshell energy to protect us, we can use it to remove something as well. And as we crush the shells and break them, we mimic the crushing and breaking of something that was put on us. Now, let's not forget our color magic here when using eggshells in our craft. White is good for purification. Brown is good for our home and grounding spells. Blue is good for communication. And green is great for wealth, abundance, and prosperity. Now, for our corporate world, our jobs and office, we absolutely can bring this energy into our work environment. And actually, personal story, I was gifted a protection spell made in an eggshell back in January of 2022. I was heading into some very emotional court stuff, and one of my employees made a protection spell in an egg for me, an eggshell. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It was tied with twine and sealed with candle wax, and I felt incredibly thankful to have the extra energy with me that day and the following weeks. Now, for our witchy work wishes, protection and extra support at the office is never going to be a bad thing. And it does not need to be obvious. The finer the eggshells are ground are probably going to be better in this environment because it won't be as noticeable. But of all the things just mentioned, work at our work. So first, spread them around the edge of your property for a protection barrier. Absolutely. Take a small handful of the eggshell powder in the palm of your hand and blow it towards your office door, creating that barrier of protection. You could even do it at the main front door, protecting the entire space. See, sprinkle crushed shells on our windowsills for home protection? Yep, same with the office, if you have an office window by you. Add a tablespoon of fine eggshell powder to our floor wash to cleanse it? You might not be washing the office floors, but you can certainly bring in a little teaspoon of eggshell powder and add it to the cleaning mixture before you wash and clean your office spaces, right? Like your desk, your shelves, your door, so on. Let's see, blend eggshells into a powder to use for drawing a protection sigil. Absolutely. You can draw a sigil underneath your desk. You can draw it on the bottom of the office door, underneath your chair, wherever you want it. Now, we are probably not taking baths at work, nor needing protective circles before we perform our magic there. But you certainly could use something, like fairy dust or the eggshell dust, like fairy dust, to create a bubble of protection physically around you. Now, what about crushed eggshells to your plants' soil at the office? Oh, yes, please. Plants, your office plants, are an important part of the earth element, and they purify the air we breathe. They also absorb negative energy. So keeping them happy and healthy with crushed eggshells is a great thing to do. Hexes? Well, yeah, you might not do the actual hex at work, but it certainly can be about something from work, right? Eggshells are a wonderful resource in our protection spells and potions. This is an area of our craft that I find myself using pretty often. Probably because of the enormous, generous amounts of eggs my household goes through naturally, but also because I think the shell and everything with it represents so much. And that connection to spells and potions that I am doing often makes the eggshell and working with it perfect. Well, I do have a poem for today's topic, so let's switch over to that. This is a little one, but something you can certainly use when making a spell or potion with eggshells. With the shell I crack and break, take my words and rightly make the spell I will and call upon to do my work from dusk to dawn. Well, thank you for joining me today. We have a really big full moon this weekend that walks us right into Samhain and Halloween. Have lots of fun. Please be safe, and I'll talk with you next week. Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.